All right. So, uh, I already filmed this twice. The first time, I stumbled too much and I rambled too much. The second time, my hand was covering the microphone on my iPad, so you couldn't really hear. Um, and I decided to do it one more time because I really want to talk about what I want to talk about. Just right up the front, I'm talking about Star Wars. I'm talking about The Last Jedi. There will be spoilers. There will be major spoilers that will come without warning beyond this point. So consider this your warning. If you haven't seen the movie, go see the movie. And seriously, like, beyond spoilers, don't listen to people's opinions of this movie until you've seen it. Go see it, make your own opinions. I'm going to be talking a lot about opinions of this movie and how some of them I find really baffling. And yeah, so get ready. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, this is your last warning. From here on out, spoilers, feelings, talking about reactions to the movie, all that stuff. Okay, here we go. So I saw the movie with my family. It was the first time Mark got to see my son. He's 7. It was the first time he got to see a movie in theaters. Or not a movie. It's the first time he saw a Star Wars movie in theaters. We actually just watched through the original trilogy and Episode 7. We haven't watched the prequels yet because, I mean, Ellison keeps joking that we should raise our son in a world where the prequels never happened. But we'll see. We'll probably watch them. They're fun for kids. And I mean, I have some issues, but that is neither here nor there. That's not the point of this video. I don't want to get into that fight right now. I want to talk about The Last Jedi. I want to talk about The Last Jedi because I went and saw it, and I loved it so much. Like, when I walked out of The Force Awakens, I was like, that was a good movie. Like, yeah, I liked it. And upon revisiting, I still really like that movie. I think a lot of people who don't like that movie, at least with that movie, I can understand. I can understand the criticism. Like, okay, it's a lot like A New Hope. Like, it is. And I think it needed to be. And I think that Movies with Mikey did an excellent, excellent video on this. You should check it out. If you haven't, where he basically talks about how that movie was a miracle. Like, living with the legacy of Star Wars, the fallout of the prequels, and J.J. Abrams as J.J. Abrams and his mixed career. Like, it's a miracle that movie ended up being as good as it is. And he goes into some really good things about the good stuff that comes out of that movie, and I really like that movie. But that's also not the point of this video. The point is that when I walked out of A Force Awakens, I was like, yeah, that was fun. When I walked out of this movie, I was giddy, like, with excitement. I had a huge smile on my face, and I was just like, holy shit, that was awesome. That was so fucking good. Like, I had to keep my mouth quiet because I don't want to spoil the movie as I'm walking out of the theater. I don't want to spoil this movie for anyone. So we get in the car, and I'm like the first words out of my mouth were Act 3 was perfect, because it was. Like, it was just non-stop perfect moments. And I loved Act 2. It was long and kind of weird, but I loved it. I loved the beginning, like the whole thing. I love the movie. I think it's a great movie, and I think as I rewatch it, I'm going to fall more and more in love with it. Mostly because I have so many questions that this movie has made me ask of myself, of the world, of the deep theological and social and philosophical concepts that I want to explore through second and third and fourth watchings. And those are always the good signs of a movie, of a really good movie, are the ones where it makes me want to rewatch it so I can not necessarily dive deeper into its fiction, but dive deeper into the way it works as a piece of fiction, as a truth-telling device. Like, it makes me want to watch it again so I can ask more questions of it, and those questions can lead me closer to deep concepts, and it makes me want to watch it more so I can use it as a mirror as I look at society through the lens of fiction. It makes me want to watch it more as entertainment, and that's hold on to all those things, fiction as a way of diving into deeper truths through asking questions, fiction as a mirror of society and yourself, for like self-improvement and looking at society in a critical way, fiction as entertainment. Like, remember those things and those as the purpose and point of fiction, because I think we'll get to it in a second, but I think a lot of people who didn't like this movie think of fiction in a fundamentally different way, and I think that's a part of the problem. But anyways, we'll get to that in a second. So I get home. I love the movie. I adored the movie. I finally go and I start looking at all the stuff that I avoided from my friends that was spoilers. My one friend had a Twitter feed. My friend Alan, he had his Twitter feed of like Star Wars tears, and there were all these people saying that the movie was ruined Star Wars and stuff. And I was like, what? How? And I was so perplexed by this point of view. Like, I didn't get it. How could you hate this movie that much? How much do you believe that this movie ruined Star Wars, right? Like, the prequels didn't ruin Star Wars. How could this movie ruin Star Wars if the prequels didn't? Like, I just didn't get it. Like, and so I tried to think. I tried to go like, okay, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. The one thing I came to, the first thing I came to is, it has a lot of very absurd moments, a lot of very silly, absurd, funny moments. And maybe they felt it was too try hard with its comedy, but this is really tough for me because I just rewatched the original movies. The original movies are goofy as fuck, and it's not just like the prequels. No, the original trilogy has so much goofiness in it, and it's wonderful, and it just fits. It's always been a movie that balances its really serious moments with its really silly moments. It's always been family entertainment, so there's always been a lot of that, and it nothing in this movie. If anything, I felt like this movie kind of shed. I think the one major criticism I might have of The Force Awakens is it was a little too, like, J.J. Abrams' dark, serious film. Like, I mean, it obviously had a lot of humor too, but it just, every scene, like the way they did the grading and the way that they would set up the scenes, there was just a lot of very, like, you know, this is a modern Star Wars film, so it's kind of like what he did with the first Star Trek movie. I don't know. Again, I don't want to get too into that, but I felt like this one had a better tone that, in my mind, reminded me of the original trilogy more. So I was like, oh, that can't be it. Like, and I'm just gonna put this out there. I know that there are some people out there who hate this movie for really shitty reasons, like damaging, awful reasons, like there's too many women in it, or, you know, why is, you know, like there's too much diversity, or nonsense like that. And sorry, I got a notification, but I wanted to make sure it wasn't. Anyways, doesn't matter. You know, I know that there are going to be people out there who have their shitty reasons for not liking this movie, and I'm trying to believe that most of the people who are criticizing it and saying it ruins Star Wars don't hate it for those reasons. I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. I do believe that I've some of the criticism, because here's the thing, I didn't know, I couldn't figure it out. I knew there had to be something beyond, like, really awful sexism and racism, and so I decided to watch some of the videos. I went and watched a few why The Last Jedi ruined Star Wars, why I hated The Last Jedi videos, and I will say some of the criticism, like you can talk about how, oh no, it's not the women, it's not, it's, and then you have your justification for why it's okay to be mad at the women in the movie. You're still mad at the women in the movie. Like, your justification doesn't land. Like, one of the just quick aside, because this isn't my main point, but like the concept, the whole side story with Poe is so good. Like, it's so good. It's there as a deconstruction of the, like, because Poe is supposed to be like the, you know, kind of carrying the torch of Han Solo, right? He's the rogue, and he is, in this movie, they deconstructed the worst parts of Harrison Ford's character, the parts that were, you know, obviously making him make bad decisions, and in the early movies he would do awful things that, you know, a person shouldn't do to another person, and make foolhardy, you know, off-the-cuff decisions, and because of the time and the way that masculinity was portrayed in movies, he would just get away with it, and it would work. And I feel like this movie, operating in its time and space, wanted to take some space to deconstruct that, and they did in such a wonderful way, a way that doesn't demonize Poe. It doesn't make him like, oh, the evil man. No, not at all. Like, as a matter of fact, for a part of the movie, you end up, like, innately rooting for him, and then you realize, oh shit, I was innately rooting for him. Like, at least for me. Like, for me, it was like, oh my god, I was kind of rooting for him. Like, yeah, insurrection, and then, but then even at the end of it, they're like, you know, it's a lesson he has to learn, you know, and it's growth. It's not condemnation. It's not oh, see, this is why those characters are awful and shouldn't be in movies. No, it's let's show how these characters can grow through our movies and show how in ourselves we can like grow and how as a culture we can grow. So that's one point that I think is I would just fundamentally disagree with. But there's this bigger notion of like they're ruining Luke. Like Luke isn't the way I think Luke would be in this movie. I don't think Luke is the way the source material would predict Luke to be in this movie. And that's where I want to get back to what fiction is and isn't, because I feel like there are so many people, and this is one of the big things I saw in all of this movie ruins Star Wars, which I think is an absurd statement, but that that the original Star Wars movies are like scripture, and they tell things that need to be upheld through every other thing that bears the name Star Wars, and that everything that is added to the mythos of Star Wars, to the mythology of Star Wars, every piece of Star Wars fiction needs to be completely congruent with the notions and the characters where they were in the original Star Wars films. And all the media that we believe is also congruent with that. So if there's like an EU piece or a something from the prequels we like, then that also gets added to the list of requirements that new Star Wars media has to fulfill. And it's almost like you're trying to create an actual universe out of fiction, and that is so fundamentally not what fiction is about. Like if you really break down like getting into like some like storytelling epistemology, the way we tell truth, all sorts of stuff, like stories aren't, I think stories can be like, obviously world building is important, and I'm not trying to say it isn't, but I believe very firmly that we use fiction for so many deeper things than just creating a world, right? We use fiction for so much more than just creating a cohesive realistic, I don't even know, like it's so fundamentally bonkers to me, because to me a story asks questions, a story shines a mirror, a story entertains, a story conveys truth, a story does all of these deep things, and yes, good stories do that all while maintaining cohesion and building beautiful worlds and all of that. But like this notion that like this movie is inherently awful, not because in my mind, nothing that they did was like world breaking at all. Like at all. If anything, they took the reality that like the concepts of the Jedi Order are from an ancient religion, and that ancient religion may be flawed, and that we need to, and that as Luke, like one of the most powerful Jedi, looked over the ancient texts and connected deeply with the Force in isolation. Like he had this deep religious spiritual experience with the unifying force of reality, the Force, and in it he saw the truth. He saw the truth that the Force runs through everything. The Force is not just something that is in the royal blood of the Jedi line, that the Force is in all of us, and that is obviously one of the huge themes of this movie, and that doesn't in any way betray anything. Like everything still exists as it is with that, and if you want to like deep nitpick like that somehow breaks something, in my mind you're missing the forest for the trees, I suppose. Like you're missing the point entirely. And the closest thing I can compare it to is, to me, it is very similar to like young earth creationists or people who need to prove that the flood literally happened, because like to me the story of the flood or the creation poem has nothing to do with proving a literal event happening. They have everything to do with like these deep concepts, these questions they make us ask. Like these stories were told over and over and over again around bonfires and religious gatherings until they were finally written down in the Hebrew Torah and then carried on through thousands of years. The reason why is not to prove to us literally that an absurd flood that has like very little like plausibility of actually happening. They're not here for that. Like that's not even their purpose. So even if it was possible, that's not the point. That's not why thousands of years of people, especially the people closest to the beginning of the story, would tell these stories. They were about all those other things I said. They were about looking at the world through the lens of a story, looking at the divine through the lens of the story, looking at yourself, asking deep questions, questions that we're still asking about ourselves right here and now. And that's the point of story. That's the point of fiction. That's the point of myth. That is the point of all of this. And so to reduce our modern stories to like needing to fit a perceived notion of what a what a Star Wars film is, and then to claim that this can't be that. I think one of the most absurd critiques I saw about this movie was so many people saying this was an excellent science fiction film, but a terrible Star Wars film. Like, fuck you. If it's an excellent science fiction film, then it's an excellent, like, then it's an excellent film, and that means it's an excellent Star Wars film. Like, that notion is so insane. Like, and it's just because that means that, like, I don't know, there's so little behind that. And I listened to a lot of what they had to say, and I felt a lot of it like was just like, I guess the best thing I could say to these people is you gotta let your tree burn. Like, you just gotta let the tree burn. Like, your notions of what you think Jedi are, or what you think Luke was supposed to be, or what you think this should have been or that should have been, like, you gotta let them burn, because like that's not, like, fundamentally that's not what it is. And two, it's a beautiful thing if you let go of that. And three, you're missing it. Like, you're missing it because you're fundamentally looking at story, in my mind, in the most shallow way possible. Maybe not the wrong way, but in the most shallow way you can look at a story. And so, like, if you really hate this movie and you hear what I'm saying and you just want to call me some dumb, just dumbass JW, whatever, my genuine hope is that you use the positivity around this movie. You use that contrasted with your negative feelings. Look inside, like, deconstruct why you're feeling that way, because our feelings are really complicated and they're affected by lots of things, and we like to think that we are rational, like, logical beings, but in reality we are very complex, muddy beings whose rationality is muddied and clouded by personal bias and our past and other opinions we've heard from other people we respect, and social pressure and a million other emotional and social things. And that it's really important when we have feelings to, especially feelings that might be really strong about things, that we look at why we feel that way and we deconstruct why, especially when they are landing on the negative, especially when they are trying to diminish the joy other people are getting out of the world. It's important in those moments to really take a hard look at why you feel the way you look. I've done this a lot in my life with things, and sometimes I know I just have those criticisms, but I really feel with this one there's a lot more going on, and my hope is that people will take a moment to look inward and deconstruct why, because I still don't really get it. I get it because I've read them, but I feel like either you don't get stories, or you're so caught up in the past, and you're so caught up, not even in the past, but in your perceived, built up false reality of a false story. Like, you have built a perception of a fictional universe that this movie now doesn't fit in, and I don't think it's the movie's fault. I think you need to dismantle that perception of a fictional universe and allow the fictional universe to exist for the reasons that it should exist, and not just building your world the way you think it should be built. And those are my thoughts. So yeah, I have a lot more. I could go into great detail about all sorts of stuff I think was really important or good about this movie, but I'm going to leave it at that because it's quite late and I need to go to sleep. But yeah, that's where I'm at. I hope you don't take this too wrong if you really didn't like the film. If you're like a friend of mine and you really didn't like it, I'd love to have like a late night talk over some like whiskey with you about it, because like I want to have good face-to-face conversations with people, because to me, like, there's so much that I think people might have missed because either they were looking for something, or they were looking in the wrong direction, or, there's stuff that I know I missed because some parts like kind of threw me cinematically, and I want to go back and like sit with them, because I really feel like the things that made me the most like, that's kind of weird, are the things that are going to, like, in 10 years be like the stuff I want to talk about in how monumental The Last Jedi was. So, anyways, good night. There's my super random thoughts.